Living Well with Chronic Illness, a personal story from a 67-year-old woman. Shared with love and honesty by Joan M., 67 years old. Before the diagnosis, I didn't grow up thinking about illness. In fact, I hardly thought about my body at all until it stopped working the way I expected it to. My younger years were spent chasing after my 3 children, baking cookies for school fundraisers, working part-time as a librarian, and gardening every spring until my hands were stained with dirt and joy. My husband, Mark, and I traveled when we could, visited our grandchildren as they grew older, and generally lived what I considered a modest, healthy, happy life. I was never one to skip checkups or eat recklessly. Sure, I enjoyed an extra slice of cake now and then, but who doesn't? I walked regularly, ate what I thought was balanced food, and slept soundly most nights. So, when the symptoms crept in, tiredness that lingered, more frequent bathroom trips, occasional dizzy spells, I chalked it up to aging. Just part of getting older, I told myself. I was wrong. The day everything changed. I still remember the exact day I got my diagnosis. It was a Thursday morning in late September. The air was crisp, and I wore my favorite cardigan. I had scheduled a routine physical, nothing unusual. But when the blood work came back, my doctor's expression turned serious. "Joan," she said gently, "your A1C is at 8.6. And your blood pressure is consistently over 150. We need to talk." Words like type 2 diabetes, hypertension, risk of stroke floated through the room like heavy clouds. I nodded, numb. I tried to act composed. But inside, I was crumbling. That night, I sat in the kitchen long after dinner, staring at my hands. The same hands that had held my babies, turned pages of novels, and hugged my husband tightly in joy and sorrow. Now those hands trembled with uncertainty. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Mark breathe beside me. My mind raced with what ifs. What if I had caught it earlier? What if I had done something wrong? What if I didn't have much time left? In the days that followed, I went through a series of tests, referrals, and medication briefings. There were pamphlets and diet charts, glucose meters, and pill organizers. It was all overwhelming. I felt like my life had been handed over to a medical folder. My identity was becoming patient, and I hated that. I remember sitting in the waiting room of the endocrinologist's office, surrounded by people who looked as lost and tired as I felt. It was like being initiated into a secret club I never asked to join. The kind where people measured their days in pill bottles and blood pressure readings. One morning, as I waited for my blood test results, I overheard a woman in her 70s talking to the nurse. She was joking about her robotic routine, taking her meds and checking her sugar as if she were winding herself up for the day. But her eyes were kind and her laughter was real. That moment struck me. Even in the midst of managing an illness, she carried light. That's when I began to understand something deeper. I couldn't control everything, but I could control how I responded. If I couldn't cure it, maybe I could learn to live well with it. Something shifted the morning I heard my youngest granddaughter giggle over FaceTime. Her innocence, her joy, it reminded me that I still had so many reasons to fight, to adapt, to live well. That's when I promised myself, I will learn, I will change, and I will reclaim joy. Even in the face of this diagnosis, denial, anger, and the long night, I went through every emotion over the next few weeks. First, denial. Maybe it's a mistake, I told myself. I'll eat better for a month and it will go away. But my blood pressure monitor didn't lie. Neither did the glucometer. Then came the anger. It was sharp and irrational. I snapped at Mark over silly things. I avoided phone calls. I even ignored my doctor's messages for a week. The worst part was the shame. I felt like I had failed. Failed myself, failed my body, failed my family. I had always been the caregiver, the strong one. Now I was the one who needed care, and I hated how that felt. There were nights I cried in the bathroom with the faucet running so Mark wouldn't hear. I didn't want him to see me that way. Vulnerable, defeated. The quietest pain of all came from how invisible my suffering was. No one could see the panic I felt every time I ate something, unsure how my body would react. No one knew how terrifying it was to lie awake, wondering if my heart was working too hard. I smiled through dinners, through family visits. But inside, I was unraveling. But Mark, bless him, never pushed. He simply stayed close. He made me tea. He rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep. His quiet support reminded me that I didn't have to fight alone. One morning, I finally broke the silence. I sat at the kitchen table and told him everything, the fear, the frustration, the sadness. He listened, really listened, and when I was done, he simply took my hand and said, "We'll figure it out together." Slowly, I started talking about it. First with him, then with my daughter, eventually with myself. That was the start of healing, choosing a new path. Acceptance didn't come all at once. It came in pieces like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. It came in the form of curiosity. I started reading books about nutrition, about women aging with strength, about how mindset affects healing. I watched YouTube videos of other women sharing their journeys. One morning, after my blood sugar dropped unexpectedly and I had to sit down on the cold kitchen floor, I realized I couldn't afford to live passively anymore. My body was talking to me and I needed to listen. So I made a new kind of to-do list. Eat breakfast with protein. Check sugar levels. Move, even a little. Breathe. Stretch. Rest. This wasn't about perfection. It was about participation. About showing up for myself every day, even when I didn't feel like it. I began to find a rhythm. I wasn't doing everything right, but I was doing something right. My energy slowly returned. My confidence crept back. I started going for short walks again, at first just down the street, then around the block, then to the park where I used to take the kids when they were little. I noticed the trees more. I noticed the air. I noticed myself again. And little by little, that new path became my normal. Rebuilding my routine, one gentle habit at a time. It didn't happen overnight. There was no magical morning where I woke up, full of energy and determination, ready to take back my life. Instead, there were small, hesitant steps, a slow rebuilding of the rhythm I had once taken for granted. I had to create a new routine, not out of ambition, but out of necessity. My body had changed, and so my life had to change with it. The first habit I built was waking up slowly. I stopped jumping out of bed the moment my eyes opened. Instead, I gave myself a few quiet minutes, wiggling my fingers, stretching my legs, taking a few deep breaths. I'd sit up slowly, allowing my blood pressure to catch up with my intentions. These were small actions, but they helped me feel grounded and safe. It became a ritual of patience, a way to begin each day gently rather than rushing into it. Next came hydration. I started keeping a glass of water on my nightstand. Before my morning coffee, before my pills, I drank the water. It helped me wake up gently and gave my body a signal. Today, we begin with care. It sounds so simple, but that glass of water became a silent promise I made to myself each day. Meal planning became another cornerstone. I used to eat whenever I remembered or skip meals altogether when I got too busy or too tired. But now skipping meals was not an option. My blood sugar demanded consistency. I began to plan my breakfast with intention. Oatmeal with fruit, scrambled eggs with spinach, whole grain toast with almond butter. It wasn't about dieting, it was about nourishment, stability, and giving my body the fuel it needed. At first, I resented this kind of structured living. It felt rigid, confining. I missed the freedom of spontaneity. But then something shifted. The routine became a kind of rhythm, a music that carried me through the day. Predictability, it turned out, was a kind of peace. I also began to schedule rest. This was perhaps the hardest habit of all. I was used to pushing through, doing just one more thing before sitting down. But my body was no longer subtle about its limits. If I didn't rest, it would demand rest in harsher ways: fatigue, headaches, mental fog. So I learned to pause. I created little islands of rest throughout my day. A cup of tea on the porch, 10 minutes with my feet up after lunch, soft music while I closed my eyes. I didn't need long breaks, just consistent ones. And over time, those little pauses restored me. I reevaluated my evenings. I used to stay up late, scrolling my phone or watching television. But poor sleep was making everything worse: my energy, my mood, my blood pressure. So I started winding down earlier. I lit a candle, put away screens, read something gentle. I started treating sleep as part of my healing, not just the end of my day. There were setbacks, days when I fell back into old habits, times when I skipped meals or stayed up too late. I didn't punish myself for those moments. Instead, I returned to my routine like returning home, knowing it was built to support me, not shame me. What surprised me most was how much better I began to feel. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in subtle, encouraging ways. I woke up with a little more clarity. My legs didn't ache as much. I smiled more, even laughed. My mornings became moments of renewal instead of dread. I made a morning checklist and stuck it to the fridge. Sit up slowly. Drink water. Breathe deeply. Eat breakfast within 30 minutes. Light movement or stretching. Take medication. This list wasn't rigid. It was a rhythm, a return to myself. Sometimes I would forget a step, but I'd always try again the next day. That's what rebuilding looks like, a willingness to try again. And again. And again. Friends started to notice. "You seem more at peace," one of them said during a walk. I hadn't even realized it was visible. But it was true. Rebuilding my routine didn't just support my body, it reshaped my mind. It taught me discipline, yes, but also tenderness. It reminded me that healing isn't a straight road, but a series of steady steps. This new way of living didn't erase my diagnosis, but it helped me hold it differently. No longer a threat, but a companion. Something I walked with, not something that chased me. I'm not perfect. Some mornings I still forget. Some nights I still worry. But now I know the way back. And that is everything. Healing the mind, learning to care for my emotional health. It took me a long time to realize that my emotional health was just as important as my physical health. For years, I carried the weight of my diagnosis, diabetes, high blood pressure, as if it were a private burden, something to manage quietly, something to hide. I focused so much on the numbers, my A1C, my blood pressure readings, my weight. But I wasn't looking at the signs that couldn't be measured. The quiet sadness, the irritability, the way I sometimes stared at the ceiling at night, feeling a dull ache I couldn't name. No one ever told me that chronic illness doesn't just live in the body, it settles in the mind too. At first, I called it tiredness. Then I said I was just in a funk. But after a while, I had to admit it. I was struggling emotionally, and I didn't know what to do about it. Some days, the simplest things felt overwhelming. I'd sit at the kitchen table, knowing I needed to cook, clean, take a walk, but unable to begin. Other days, I felt so lonely it was like a weight on my chest. I missed the sound of voices in the house, the chaos of raising kids, the energy of full calendars. Now the quiet was deafening. I didn't talk about it because I thought, who would understand? People around me would say, "You look great," or "You're so strong." And I'd smile. I'd nod. I'd say thank you. Then I'd go home and cry. One evening, after a particularly hard day, I sat down with my journal and wrote, "I am not okay, but I want to be." That sentence was the beginning of change. The next day, I told my daughter. She was surprised, even teary. She said, "Mom, I had no idea you were feeling like this. Why didn't you say something?" "I didn't want to be a burden," I replied. And she said the words I'll never forget. "You're not a burden. You're my mother. Let me help." So I let her help. She found a therapist who specialized in older adults. She even went with me to the first appointment. It wasn't easy. I had to unlearn years of silence. I had to admit that being strong didn't mean being stoic. It meant being honest. In therapy, I learned something powerful. There is grief in aging, and it's okay to feel it. I was grieving many things. My youthful energy, my old routine, even my former identity. I wasn't the Joan who could skip breakfast and clean the house in a single afternoon. I wasn't the woman who stayed up late dancing at weddings or spent weekends hiking in the hills. I was someone new. Still me, but changed. And change, even good change, brings grief. Naming that grief gave me space to breathe. The therapist helped me build emotional tools. How to identify my feelings. How to sit with sadness without drowning in it. How to reframe negative thoughts gently. How to forgive myself when I had a bad day. I also began small rituals for my mental well-being. Each morning I wrote 3 things I was grateful for. Some days it was big, like my daughter's laugh or a kind call from a friend. Other days it was simple. Warm socks, sunlight on the floor, the smell of toast. I found comfort in these little blessings. They reminded me that joy doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it whispers. I started meditating, not in a perfect cross-legged way, but sitting in my recliner, eyes closed, breathing slowly for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. But it centered me. I made time for music, soft piano in the mornings, old jazz at night. I reread favorite books and watched films that made me smile. I joined a senior writing circle. I wrote short stories and poems, pouring feelings onto paper I didn't know how to say aloud. And slowly, the fog began to lift. Not all at once. There are still days when I feel fragile, still mornings when I wake up heavy. But now I have tools. I have support. And most of all, I have hope. I learned that emotional health isn't about always feeling happy. It's about feeling whole. It's about being allowed to feel sad, lost, angry, and still choosing to care for yourself anyway. One afternoon at the park, I met a woman my age. We sat on a bench and talked about our health issues. I shared a bit of my story and she said, "You're so brave. I just push through. I try not to think about it." I looked at her and said, pushing through worked for me for a while. Until I started pushing away the parts of me that needed the most love. She nodded quietly. That's the thing about emotional pain, it hides behind strength. And strength isn't the absence of struggle. It's the willingness to feel and grow, even when it's hard. These days, I check in on my mental state the same way I check my blood pressure. I ask, how am I feeling today? What do I need? Who can I talk to? What small thing can I do to feel better? Sometimes the answer is a walk. Sometimes it's calling a friend. Sometimes it's just letting myself cry and saying, this is hard, but I'm still here. And that, to me, is the heart of healing. So if you, like me, are living with a chronic illness, please remember this. Your mind matters. Your feelings matter. And you do not have to carry them alone. Speak. Write. Reach out. Ask for help. Let your heart be held. Because you deserve that care. Not just your body. All of you. When I fell and what helped me stand again. Joan M. 67 years old. Falling both literally and figuratively is part of growing older. But no one ever told me how deeply one fall, just one, can shake you. Not just your bones, but your confidence, your sense of safety, even your trust in your own body. My first real fall happened one chilly morning in October. I remember the smell of wet leaves and the quiet hum of the neighborhood waking up. I was bringing out the trash, still half asleep. Wearing socks instead of shoes. There was a slick spot on the porch step. My foot slid. My body twisted. And in an instant I was on the ground. I didn't break anything, thank God. But I bruised my hip, scraped my elbow, and more than anything I scared myself. Lying there, stunned and hurting, I remember thinking, this is how it happens. This is how everything changes. My neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, who just stepped out to get her paper, saw me and rushed over. She helped me up, called my daughter, and even made me tea while we waited. But the real damage wasn't the bruise. It was the fear that settled into my chest in the days that followed. Suddenly my house, my safe little haven, felt like a trap. The stairs looked steep. The bathroom floor seemed slippery. I found myself walking slower, second-guessing every step, even avoiding going out unless I had someone with me. It wasn't just fear of falling again, it was the fear that maybe I wasn't as independent as I thought. That maybe I was vulnerable. And for someone like me, who'd always prided herself on being capable, practical, resilient, that realization was unbearable. That fall shook something loose in me. Not just physically. Emotionally. It brought up every unspoken fear I had about aging. What if I lose my independence? What if I become a burden? What if this is just the beginning of a slow decline? I tried to push those thoughts away, but they lingered. For weeks I was careful. Too careful. I canceled a lunch with friends because I didn't want to take the bus. I stopped walking to the park. I even stopped gardening, the thing that had brought me joy for decades, because bending down made me nervous. It was my granddaughter Lily who unknowingly pulled me out of it. She was visiting one afternoon and asked, "Grandma, why aren't you planting anything this year? The backyard looks sad." I looked at her and the words caught in my throat. "It's because I'm scared." I wanted to say, but instead I said, "Maybe I'll try again soon." That night, I sat with my journal and wrote. Yes, I fell, but I also got up. And I'm still here. I'm still capable. Just a little more careful now. That was the turning point. The next morning, I made a list titled, Things That Make Me Feel Strong. A walking with a cane instead of staying home. Asking for help when I need it. A learning how to prevent another fall. Talking about my fear instead of hiding it. Planting one small pot of herbs in the back step. And then step by step, sometimes slowly, sometimes shakily, I started to reclaim my life. I talked to my doctor about balance exercises. He referred me to a physical therapist who taught me simple routines I could do at home to strengthen my legs, improve my core, and sharpen my reflexes. First, I felt silly standing on one leg at the kitchen counter, practicing slow side steps, doing stretches with resistance bands. But then I noticed I wasn't wobbling as much. I stood taller. Even walking across the living room felt more secure. I also took a long, honest look at my house. With the help of my daughter and son-in-law, we made changes. A grab bars in the bathroom, a non-slip mats under rugs, a better lighting in the hallway, a bench near the front door so I could sit to take off my shoes. These weren't signs of weakness. They were signs of wisdom. I started using a walking stick, not because I couldn't walk without it, but because it gave me confidence. It said to the world and to myself, I care enough about this body to keep it safe. And slowly my world expanded again. I returned to gardening, starting small. Just one pot of basil, then a row of marigolds. Then one Saturday, I spent the whole morning planting tomatoes with Lily. We got dirt under our nails and sweat on our foreheads. And I felt alive in a way I hadn't in months. I also started talking about the fall. At first, it was just with friends, women my age who nodded knowingly. Then at my diabetes support group, I shared the full story. And what surprised me was that nearly every woman in the room had fallen at some point. But no one had really talked about it. Because we don't just fall physically, we fall into silence, into shame, into self-doubt. And that silence keeps us small. So I spoke. And in speaking, I healed. Not instantly, but steadily. I realized that falling is part of life. But rising? That's where the power is. And it doesn't always look like standing up straight with pride. Sometimes it's sitting on the porch and letting the sun warm your face. Sometimes it's calling your neighbor and saying, can you walk with me to the store? Sometimes it's crying in the bathroom. Then drying your eyes and making a cup of tea. Strength isn't loud. It's quiet. It's persistent. It's saying, I'm still here, even when everything feels uncertain. I still have moments when my body surprises me in ways I don't like. A sudden ache, a dizzy spell, a misstep. But now I meet those moments with gentleness, because I know what I've been through, and I know what I'm capable of. So if you've fallen, literally or figuratively, know this. You are not weak. You are not alone. And you will rise again. Not the same as before. Maybe stronger. Maybe softer. But definitely wiser. Slowing down, finding peace in a simpler pace. Joan M. 67 years old. There was a time when I believed that slowing down meant giving up. I equated rest with weakness, quiet with emptiness, and a slower pace with some kind of failure. But chronic illness, more than anything, has taught me the value of stillness. Not as surrender, but as wisdom. Before my diagnosis, my life was a constant list. I was always checking something off, racing the clock, chasing productivity. I filled my days with busyness, thinking it gave me purpose. I had been retired for a few years, but I still acted like I had a boss breathing down my neck. If I wasn't cleaning, cooking, organizing, helping someone else, what was I even doing? Then came the exhaustion, the kind that doesn't go away after a nap, the kind that seeps into your bones and your spirit. My body was speaking clearly, and for the first time I had to listen. So I did something that felt foreign. I stopped. I stopped pushing. I stopped forcing. I stopped pretending I had the same energy I did 20 years ago. And at first I hated it. I hated how quiet my house felt at 2 p.m. I hated how long it took me to fold the laundry. I hated the guilt that whispered in my ear whenever I chose to sit instead of scrub the kitchen. But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. In the silence, I heard things I hadn't heard in years. I heard birdsong. I heard the rhythm of my own breath. I heard the sound of wind through trees, the laughter of children walking home from school, the clink of a spoon in a teacup. And I began to realize the world had been singing to me all along. I had just been too busy to listen. I started giving myself permission to do less, but to feel more. Instead of rushing through breakfast, I ate by the window, watching the sunlight shift across the table. Instead of filling my calendar with errands, I chose one meaningful task each day, just one. Instead of multitasking, I focused on single, intentional moments. Brewing tea, watering the garden, writing a letter by hand. I found that when I slowed down, time didn't shrink. It expanded. 1 hour of calm presence felt fuller than 3 hours of frantic activity. I remember one morning when I spent nearly an hour arranging flowers. I had clipped them from the backyard, simple blooms, nothing fancy. I placed them in a small vase. Moved them to different windowsills, trimmed stems, adjusted angles. That might sound trivial, but in that hour I felt a sense of joy I hadn't touched in months. Not because the flowers were perfect, but because I had been with them, fully, without rushing towards something else. Slowing down helped me reconnect with myself, not the busy mom, or retired volunteer, or chronic illness patient, but the woman beneath all those roles. And I noticed my body responded. My blood pressure dropped. My digestion improved. I slept better. Not because I found a miracle cure, but because I was no longer asking my body to run a marathon every day just to feel useful. I also found peace in ritual. Each evening, I light a candle before bed. Just one small flame. I sit, breathe deeply, and give thanks for anything and everything. Sometimes it's gratitude for a phone call, or for having clean sheets, or for the fact that my knees didn't ache that day. This ritual, simple as it is, reminds me, I am here. I am alive. And that is enough. There are still days I feel the pull to rush. I catch myself moving too quickly, talking too fast, thinking 3 steps ahead. But now I notice it. And I gently guide myself back. Back to the breath. Back to the moment. Back to the slowness that sustains me. Living slow doesn't mean living less. In fact, I've found that the slower I move, the more deeply I experience life. I no longer judge myself by what I accomplish in a day. Instead, I ask, did I nourish my body? Did I speak kindly to myself? Did I notice something beautiful? Did I connect with someone I love? If I can answer yes to even one of those, I consider the day a success. There's a quote I keep on my refrigerator now. It says, "Nature never rushes, yet everything is accomplished." I read it often. It reminds me that healing doesn't happen in a hurry. Growth doesn't need a deadline. And peace isn't found in speed, it's found in presence. So if you, like me, are learning how to slow down, know that you're not falling behind. You're simply walking a different path, one with more space to breathe, more time to notice, and more room to simply be. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You are wise enough to stop, to listen, and to live gently. And that, my dear, is a beautiful kind of strength. The things I wish I knew sooner. Joan M., 67 years old. There are things I know now deeply, quietly, with every fiber of my being, that I wish I had known when I was younger. Not because I want to go back. Not because I have regrets that keep me up at night. But because I know how much kinder, how much more peaceful my life could have been if I had understood a few truths earlier. So if I could sit across from my 40-year-old self, or even my 55-year-old self, I would take her hand and say these things one by one, and maybe, just maybe, they will speak to you too. Your body is not the enemy. I wish I had stopped treating my body like a problem to be solved or a machine to be pushed. For so long, I ignored its signals. I punished it for being tired. I criticized it for changing. When I had pain, I popped pills and kept going. When I gained weight, I scolded myself. When I felt exhausted, I called myself lazy. But now I see it clearly. This body is my companion. It carries me, breathes for me, holds me up when I cry. Even when it faltered, even when illness arrived, it still did everything it could to keep me going. I wish I had listened earlier. Tended to it with care, not judgment. Fed it with love, not shame. Rested it without guilt. Underscore 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 underscore. Slowing down is not failure. There was a time when I thought rest was weakness, that I had to stay productive to be valuable. I equated worth with action, laundry done, meals cooked, emails answered. I now know that the most meaningful moments in life are often the slowest. Sitting in silence with someone you love, watching the sky change at sunset, feeling your breath deepen during a quiet walk. Slowing down isn't about giving up. It's about tuning in to your breath, to your needs, to the beauty around you that rushing makes you miss. underscore 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 underscore. Ask for help. It's brave. I thought I had to carry everything alone. I didn't want to burden my children. I didn't want to appear weak to my friends. So I smiled through pain. I nodded through fear. But chronic illness broke that illusion. It brought me to my knees and strangely to deeper connection. I learned that letting someone in is not defeat. It's courage. It invites others to love you in ways that matter. It teaches your children how to care. It builds bonds built on truth, not performance. We were never meant to do this life alone. Underscore 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 underscore. You can grieve and be grateful at the same time. When my health declined, I thought I had to pick one, sadness or strength. But life doesn't work that way. I can miss the woman I used to be. The energy, the freedom, the ease, and still be proud of who I am now. I can cry about what I've lost and still marvel at what I've gained. Wisdom, resilience, tenderness, grief and gratitude are not opposites. They are companions. They sit together at the same table. And when I learned to welcome both, I found peace. There is no right way to age. Don't let magazines or commercials or well-meaning people fool you. You don't have to look 35, run marathons, or take up salsa dancing to be aging well. Though if you love salsa dancing, go for it. Aging well is living honestly, listening to your body, laughing when you can, asking questions, saying no, saying yes, being present in your life, however it looks. Some days, thriving means doing yoga. Other days, it means wearing soft clothes, drinking soup, and watching birds from the window. Both are valid. Both are beautiful. Underscore 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 underscore. Let go of should. I carried that word like a backpack full of bricks. I should be more active. I should be more optimistic. I should have figured this out by now. All it ever did was weigh me down. Here's what I know now. You are allowed to be exactly where you are. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be scared. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to grow slower than others. And you are still worthy. Moments matter more than milestones. We spend so much of life chasing the next thing. The promotion, the vacation, the goal weight, the big achievement. But when I look back on the past year, the hardest year of my life, it's not the big things I remember. It's the moment my granddaughter braided my hair. It's the sound of rain while I read a book. It's the smile on my neighbor's face when I brought her soup. It's the silence after a deep breath. These are the things that make a life. Not checklists, but presence. Not accomplishments, but connection. Underscore 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 underscore. 8. You are more than your illness. Yes, I live with diabetes. Yes, I live with high blood pressure. Yes, I take medication, monitor my numbers, go to appointments. But I am not a diagnosis. I am a woman, a friend, a mother, a sister, a soul. My story is not defined by my lab results. My value is not measured by how well I manage my condition. I am still creative. I am still growing. I am still worthy of love, laughter, and purpose. Every single day. underscore 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 underscore. Final thoughts from a woman who's still learning. If you are reading this and you feel behind, broken, too tired, too late, I want you to know, you are not behind. You are not broken. You are exactly where you need to be. Life isn't a race. Healing isn't a straight line. And peace isn't a prize you earn by doing everything right. It is here in this moment waiting for you to slow down, to listen, to begin again gently. I wish I had known all this sooner, but I'm grateful I know it now. And if it reaches you in time to make even one day a little lighter, then it was worth every word.